Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope everybody is safe and healthy and ready for a fast-paced discussion. So let's get right into it. 5 years ago, everyone was trying to figure out how to connect machines and analyze their data. By and large, the tech stack is available and manufacturers can deliver a connected product. But the major obstacle now is how to monetize them, right? What's the right business model for digitized equipment? So to answer that question, we've assembled a really great group here today. Our goal will be to illuminate business model transformation across equipment and services. We've got Usman, who's Chief Commercial Officer at Honeywell Connected Enterprise, and Ganeet, who's Chief Revenue Officer at Relayer. Both guys have been deeply involved in digital business model transformation for years. So let's do a couple of quick intros and then get right to the heart of the matter. So Usman, you want to go first? Can you just give us a quick intro and tell us a little bit about the Connected Enterprise Group?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. Really excited to be here. It's a topic that's on a lot of people's mind. So I'm Chief Commercial Officer for Honeywell Connected Enterprise, and Honeywell Connected Enterprise is a business unit within Honeywell that is focused on bringing its customer and helping them transform digitally. Prior to that, I was with Spark Cognition, which is an artificial intelligence company based in Austin. And in both this current role at Honeywell Connected Enterprise as well as Spark Cognition, I've had the opportunity to take several industrial companies through the subscription and digital transformation journey. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Usman. Ganeet, you want to give us a quick intro and as quickly as possible, try and summarize what Relayer does?
Sure, happy to, Zach. I think from my perspective, so I lead all the commercial and business activities for Relayer. So as you said, Chief Revenue Officer. The focus of Relayer has really been to enable industrial companies to transform from CapEx to OpEx. We're actually a fully owned subsidiary of the largest reinsurance firm in the world, Munich Re. And we do that with a unique combination of software coupled with insurance and financing. So really interested in this conversation today. I spent a bunch of years before this at large enterprise hardware software companies, Cisco's and Oracle's of the world. And it's interesting how the software world went through the as a service transformation first. And I was at Cisco when they were going through the transformation where a significant amount of portion comes from OpEx and subscription revenues. And I think now the industrial world is ripe, right, with the underlying foundation of the technology. So trying to help the industrial world to go through the same transformation and looking forward to the discussion today.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. So just a quick agenda. We're going to do about 15-minute, 20-minute panel discussion. After that, we'll have Q&A. Audience members, you can submit Q&A via the Q&A chat box at any point, and we'll get to some of the questions at the end, and we'll end about 27 minutes from now, short and sweet. So let's start with the big picture question here, right? Is how are equipment manufacturers monetizing their value-added digital services? What does that evolution look like? Usman, you want to take that one?
Sure. Look, recurring revenue or a subscription journey looks very different for companies, right? So industrial OEMs are relatively new to this compared to what Puneet was talking about, the tech companies, and it can seem daunting. But I think the world is realizing the true ROI of that. We've seen the industrial companies that go through this journey, they see 5 times better performance than the S&P peers. And there's also customer advantages. It becomes more sticky and so on and so forth. So I wanted to at least make a couple of points. One, that, look, this is a journey. It's not starts and ends on day one. It has taken even tech companies a significant time to transform themselves from a CapEx to an OpEx type business. However, what I wanted to talk today was share a 3-step process to get you started, what that looks like for an OEM. And this is a framework that was initially shared by Zora Subscription Institute. And I call this framework Smart Metal to Subscription Model. And the 3 things would be connect your services. So as an OEM, how do I add services or sensors to take data out of them? How can we second would be repackaging to recurring. Can you turn something where you can start having a recurring type business? And then productize. The third step would be productizing as a service. And look, this is not a myth. This is not something that only big industrial companies like Honeywell and Siemens and the GEs of the world are doing. This is also happening with smaller OEMs. And I wanted to share one example, a very tangible example from a previous company, working with an industrial OEM, Apergy, which is a spin-off from Dover and Dover Energy. Dover makes reciprocating compressors, and for a very long time they had an offering where they would send people to monitor and as well as take care of any issues, maintenance issues. And what they did, they created a spotlight sensor service where they were able to add it to the compressors, and then they've added AI models on top of it, and they turned that product Champion X into a recurring model. They in that process they were able to charge a premium. They were able to give away a few things for free, and there were a lot of creative things that they did with the business models. But the key thing was adding sensors, packaging as recurring, and then productizing it as a service.
Right. Now, we've been working together for a few years. I know you've taken dozens of OEMs through this transformation, and you've done it in a pretty unique way. What do you have to add to that?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with Usman. It's a journey, right? So I think we should always think about how we get there. And how we've been thinking about this is the journey, first of all, starts with an end goal. So the end goal has to be the business outcome, right? Or the value pools that the OEMs and in fact, a lot of distributors and service providers. And the interesting thing the last 3 years we're seeing is smaller OEMs, like Usman said, but also a lot of companies with service and maintain these assets also need that similar transformation. So number one, we always try and make the customers think of the outcome, and then think of the micro goals to get there. And technology is important, but it becomes one of the micro goals, or becomes one of the goals to get there. And my mantra to my customers have been slow down before you speed up, right? And it's so counterintuitive, but the whole idea is you need to slow down, plan the journey, put the micro goals in, and then go. To quote a couple of examples, we've enabling a lot of tools grinding, tool polishing, 2D laser cutting, 3D laser cutting, other kind of additive manufacturing with 3D printers. A lot of these assets are critical, but they're not critical during the exact production process. They're more an add-on, right? And I think the incentives have not been aligned for a long time, because even if you can go lease this, by the way, subscription is not just about leasing an asset, right? It's about really how do you align the incentives that when you connect these assets, everybody has the same goal of having higher availability or performance, or whatever the goal is of the asset, and everybody shares the upside, right? So, what we're seeing is these, by a company called Cobon in the UK, or be a company called Flanders, which does this out of Evansville, Indiana, for really heavy industrial oil and gas motors and pumps. They're all they're trying to do is align the incentives that, I want to make sure you get your business goals, Mr. Customer, with the micro steps, right? Or micro goals. I want to share of that business model, which means I'm also responsible for the same goal. And that converts into both sticky and subscription. And from our perspective, as you know, Isaac, we have taken a purely gain share, revenue share approach, which is also, I think, important from our perspective, because that really is the subscription model, right? In all the subscription models you see in the SaaS world or other worlds, it is really if you align interests. And then on top of that, you take a value creation approach for everybody. Bain has done some really phenomenal work. And I know Usman spent time with Boston Consulting, so it's his competitor. But from Bain, they've done a lot of research around how subscription models, of course, 4x, 5x the revenue of the OEM, but also give 15 to 20% savings to the end consumer who's actually subscribing machines. So I think to us, we've taken a very value creation for everybody approach, and then driven subscription down from them with the concept of journey and micro goals.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on one of the things Vineet said, selling machines as a service enables OEMs to actually make a lot more money. They lock in the aftermarket services, they lock in parts, the initial capital sale of a machine, depending on whose research you read, is maybe 20% of the total asset potential revenue over its life cycle. So this enables companies to actually make more money while saving their customers money. So I kind of want to move into the not the how you do it, but the why, right? Why? How does why are OEMs doing this? Why does it differentiate them? How does it help them stay resilient and relevant in an especially volatile climate?
Yeah, I can take that first, and I'd love to get Usman's opinion absolutely after that. So, I read a report from Zura, and I love Zura too. I'm glad Usman does. More than 53% companies during COVID-19 with subscription have had no impact. And, just to quote numbers, 22, 23% have seen acceleration. So I think the interesting, one of my customers does industrial warehouse management. And, Walmarts of the world are struggling right now, and to make sure, and Apples of the world and Targets of the world, right? And they said, man, if I had all of this stuff serviced and monitored remotely, it would significantly help me during this macroeconomic climate, right? So I think the first thing is there really a need in your customer base as the OEM? Not because you want to do it, but is there really a need in the end customer base? And if there is, you truly need to do a voice of the customer, right? To understand what is the need, because there's multiple subscription models, right? You could do subscription plus overage, you could do consumption-based, outcome-based. I mean, we can go on, right? But the whole idea is understand what I think the customer really needs, or is the macroeconomic, market pushing towards it. Ghost kitchens is a great example. You have a lot of food and beverage companies trying to do this because nobody's going to restaurants anymore, and they want, ghost kitchens to prepare a lot of stuff. And might as well do that as subscription. And the second is, does this make you sticky? And does this make you participate in the value creation for your customer? So if those questions in my mind are answered, that they need it, you're participating in the value creation and revenue, as well as you can actually enable that. I think that's how we look at it. Usman, I'd love to get your thoughts.
I fully agree with you, Guneet, on the customer-centric piece of it. So customer has to be at the center of any transformation you're thinking about. One other piece that I wanted to add was the reason why OEMs want to do this. The OEMs have had a very transactional relationship in terms of selling the metal and then selling services. But it changes the relationship. It's an ongoing relationship. It becomes more strategic in nature, and you get more touch points. So it's a lot more stickier and strategic in nature. So that's another value add of moving to subscription, is the relationship that you have with the customer changes in a good way.
Yeah, agreed. So let me lay out now one of the problems with the transition to these as a service models. Let's say you're a company that sells gas compressors or wind turbines, or whatever it is. You're used to selling a thing and getting money for it. That's how it works. Now, if you want to transition into an OpEx or utilization-based model, you're going to give that thing away. Your revenue is going to tank initially. How do you engineer that so that this isn't a major cash problem for the equipment manufacturer?
Yeah, we call it swallowing the fish in a funny way, but I think you're absolutely right. And, I'm sure Usman will have more insight from an enterprise perspective, because he's gone through the same. You reduce your revenue, but, Isaac, the problem is worse. You actually increase your costs because you actually don't have capability in the organization to actually do as a service. So you might have to set up new teams and all that good stuff. I think, listen, there's no fixed playbook for this right now. But what we are doing is, at least from our perspective, we're really combining financing, insurance is this element. Because if you can, from our perspective, if you can get the technology very tightly coupled with a business outcome guarantee or an outcome, and the approach we've taken is, because of our mothership having a lot of money in the balance sheet, is actually create special purpose vehicles and create various other sources where, in the short term, we enable the OEMs to still sell the assets, sell the metal, as Usman said it. I like that. And get that revenue in the short term, but then transition that slowly with some other financial balance sheet re-engineering kind of solutions. And when they see the uptake, then they participate in that subscription revenue, which, to Usman's point, gives a lot of customer intimacy without losing the financial issue, especially for Wall Street companies. So I think that's how we've approached it: a combination of financing tools and balance sheet re-engineering with insurance and with technology.
You're all spot on, Guneet. The only thing I would add is, yes, there are some issues with revenue, but it's all about value creation. A dollar generated by a subscription-based model creates way more value for your company and for the investors and the analysts. So the market understands that as well. So if there is a dip, and obviously there are some techniques to manage those dips that Guneet talked about, and there are quite a few others as well. So it can be, the impact can be reduced, but the market understands that the subscription-based dollar is far more valuable than a perpetual or a rare dollar. So you're creating a lot more value, even if you generate a little less revenue.
So basically, industrial equipment manufacturers are now, hoping to garner similar revenue multiples to SaaS companies. Everybody wants
absolutely.
I think one thing I'd like to add to that, as I can actually ask Usman a question. Sorry, I'm playing your role. We can take care of the financial insurance risks and the technology elements. I think with a lot more learning the last 4 or 5 years as an industry. Usman, what do you think of the cultural elements? Because I see that as a bigger challenge. Like, how do organizations just think through as a service revenue models?
Look, you've hit the right point here, right? So I think the technology, the financial issues, all of this are problems that people have solved before. It's the cultural and the mindset is something that is really needed. I've personally seen digital transformation as well as subscription journey to subscription happens in companies where the leaders are fully bought in, and they are not only driving it top down, but doing things and changing the culture of the company from bottoms up as well. So we cannot, it's such an important point that we sometimes ignore, that look, financing and technology, these things are easy to get, but how do you manage the change of the culture itself? So it's probably a topic for another webinar. It's that deeper topic.
I'm glad you're facing the same problem we are, because everybody talks about Rolls-Royce at 60% power by the hour, but it took them a few decades to get there, right? And you really have to make significant changes. And Usman, I come from areas and startups and venture back where we are okay with failure, and we celebrate failure in certain cases when it's considered as a learning to grow, right? Which is a very different mindset, right? That a lot of large enterprises and industrials are not used to.
Yeah, no, digital transformation is much more about people and culture than about technology. And yes, Usman, that's a topic for like 17 other webinars, which we'll hopefully do someday. So I want to do something in about 2 minutes, and then I want to jump to Q&A. I think people talk a lot about this, and we've kind of scratched the surface of what this could look like. But I've been involved with several very unique examples of what you guys have done to help OEMs transition into these new models. I'd love to hear just kind of a crystal clear, like 1 minute description of exactly how one of your customers has done this, just what it looks like from a tech and from an insurance and a financing perspective, and then how they've actually ended up changing their model completely. Can you walk us just through one customer example?
I don't know if I can do it in a minute and that clearly, but I'll try.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, Isaac, I can take a generic example. Step one, I think a lot of customers have to figure out the end business goal. 100 million of new revenue streams is an example I can take, for one of the customers who does 2D laser cutting for us. They wanted to enable completely new digital services revenues of 100 million. Now, they don't know what that looks like, right? Because it's a journey. The second challenge they had was they have a significant amount of their, a business to distribution channel. It's not always a direct business, right? So how do you kind of go through and enable that? And I like Usman's framework and Zura's framework, which talks about how do you kind of create from a technical journey. It's about how do you create the asset to be connected, but more driven by insights and AI. Both of us come from AI world. It's not about just connecting the assets, about the insights. How does that insight lead to a dollar value? We've done stuff like compliance guarantees as a very basic element in the elevator industry to create as a service revenues. We've done smart maintenance with a fixed budget and covering all the cost for the customer. So it's not truly equipment as a service, but it's smart maintenance as a service. And that can flow very well through the distribution channel. We've done everything from Apple Care kind of packages for a company called Coborn Care, which says you buy my machine, you buy a care package, I'll take care of everything, right? Including your production. So we've done those small step changes to companies. We've created a new subsidiary and said my new product will purely and only be as a service, and it'll only be with outcome guarantees, right? So my favorite example there is, motor as a service, but motor as a service with an outcome, with a business interruption insurance. So if your mine goes down, I take care of the cost of revenue for your mine for a day. Like that's the most disruptive I've seen so far with one of our customers. But I think it's the gamut. I don't know if that was that crystal clear, but it starts from the inside and the AI to smaller step changes in the digital services all the way to a transformation. And companies take a big, all over the map. Some companies go all the way to transformation, smaller companies specifically, less than 2 billion and privately owned. But companies really have to care about their stock value and their Wall Street image, kind of take a step approach. Usman, would you agree with that? I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. And I would add a couple examples very similar to these, but how Honeywell has transformed. So Honeywell being an OEM itself, the one was the cybersecurity. We are an OEM. We make DCSs. We are known for building those products. We used to send our cyber experts or the product experts to help with hardening the products. And it was a people business. And now we have developed very strong cyber capabilities for refineries and manufacturing and farmers. And what we have been able to do is take all that information, provide expertise in a managed service capability. So we have turned we were selling a hardware and a little bit of service into a recurring theme. And now what Guneet was talking about, the insurance element to it, there's cybersecurity insurance element to it we can add and make it just take that whole thing off somebody's mind. So cybersecurity has been given to the best OT cyber team, and they don't have to worry about it, including insurance and damages. Another example that come to mind, which is very similar but had a different model, one where we had Honeywell has access to 10 million buildings out of the 17 million buildings in the world, and we have BMS where we can write and read data from buildings. We used to send people for maintenance of an HVAC or a chiller, and we have taken that hardware static type software business and turned into a digitized maintenance and an energy optimization application. And it could be outcome based. We promised 25% reduction in OpEx. And that's a big outcome based, subscription based service that we have transformed over the last few years. This would be some examples from Honeywell. I'm new to Honeywell, and I'm very impressed with how that hardware-centric model has been transformed using software and create a business model.
Okay. No, that's great, guys. So I want to get to some of these Q&A things. I'm going to combine, there's 5 questions in here that essentially boil down to risk, right? The risk of an operator investing in digital technology, the risk of an OEM trying to introduce a new business or service model. At the end of the day, risk is probably the major reason why most companies don't invest in, IoT or digital technology. So how can OEMs and operators manage the financial risk of subscription models?
I can go first, and Usman, I'd love to get your thoughts. I mean, from my perspective, the risk is different though, right? The risk is different from an operator, Isaac, to an OEM provider, to a service, company. But I think that's a very good question, because the first thing we recommend to start with is a risk assessment. And is it an execution risk? Is it a market risk? Is it a risk capture away? I mean, we're a part of the largest reinsurance company in the world, so we've been trained for the last 2 years to think about this, not before. But and also, who takes the risk? Can the risk actually be on the OEM's balance sheet, or can we take the risk away? I mean, one of my favorite examples is a company called Leone, which does cables, right, for robotics. And if you think of it, automotive companies take a lot of risk for downtime. because of robotics or the robots going down. But why should the company take the risk if the data is available and the insights are available in this digital economy, right? So we're saying we could take the risk off your balance sheet and have that risk on us only if the assets are connected with the right field service, right? So I think it's a very important question. I don't have a golden nugget answer, but it's a very important thing to do and assess the risk. And we do that for a living, but I think it's important to assess that risk before you move into this journey.
Yep. Okay. There's another one here, and this is a question that I love that I've asked people for years, so I'm gonna ask it from Andrew Smith. Under these servitization models, in theory, the customer pays less and the supplier earns more. Where does the extra money come from? Go ahead. Why don't you jump in? Whoever wants it.
Look, it's again. Sorry, go ahead. It's about value creation, and you're able to, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot more in the relationship, so you can add more services. So they might be paying less for that particular service, but you end up getting a stickier relationship and selling a lot more, and a relationship where they cannot cut you off. So it's recurring and keeps coming back, and you have a lot more ability to upsell and cross-sell and continue your subscription. So you're creating a lot more value in this model, and more value eventually leads to more revenue.
Yeah, Usman's absolutely right. I think Isaac, by the way, fun fact for everybody who's here, it takes 6 trips to fix an elevator on average in North America, right? It should not take 6 trips. So I think what this also does is there is a lot of redundancy and duplication and inefficiencies in the process. And I think what we're all saying is with real data insights, if we can actually cut those redundancies, I love the Bain paper on this, so people should go look it up. We can post a link with the YouTube recording. It talks about 15 to 20% reduction in operating costs. Of course, also the advantage of the OEM and the service company making a lot more money. And you said this, 80% of the cost is O&M, right? It's operation and maintenance, not the asset. Even though assets look very expensive in the industrial world with billions of dollars, there's a lot more millions after that for the next 10 years. I think it's more about taking out the inefficiencies, the duplication, and the insightful repair and maintenance, which will be a win-win, I believe, for everybody, right?
Right, and just to add a couple things to that, I think customer or operator productivity goes up. That creates some extra cash as the increase in productivity and efficiency on their end. But I'm kind of a cynic, and it's a zero-sum game. So somebody's losing money in this equation somewhere. And Ganeep, one thing I've heard Roulaire talk about is it's kind of like there's this dynamic between OEM, service provider, customer operator, and who is going to capture the associated value through digitization. And one of those entities is probably stealing it from somewhere else in the value chain. So if you're the OEM, you want to lock that in. You want to keep third-party service organizations away from your service revenue, from selling aftermarket parts for your equipment. So this is actually a way of locking in additional revenues that other people were making from your products or your operations. So I think there's a
look, I agree. When AWS and Microsoft were taking over the cloud world, there were about 18 or 19 other cloud providers. And what they had was the first mover advantage, right? They just captured so much market that good luck trying to compete with them today. Google's doing well, they're catching up, but they're ahead of the curve. So I think I agree. Whoever gets ahead of the curve first needs to capture more money.
Exactly. Whoever gets the market with the right, digital service and new business model is going to take that revenue away from the other players in the value chain. So it's a race. Okay, we got about 1 minute left and want to try and end on time. So just want to give both of you guys an opportunity. Any parting thoughts, any final recommendations or advice for the people in the audience, which is almost 300 people joined today?
So look, first of all, again, thank you for having me on this panel. Just reiterating the point, if you can walk away with this, is it might look daunting, but there's a lot of value there, and it's a journey. You can take the first step and make that move because the returns are pretty significant on the other side of it. So start the journey, and as it says, the journey starts with the first step. Just believe in it, believe in the value it creates, and take the first step.
The only thing I'll add is if you don't do it, somebody else will. So everything Usman said, I agree with. But if you're not taking the first step, there's somebody out there taking the first step. So just be cautious of that.
Yep. The biggest risk is doing nothing. So thank you guys. I think this was really insightful. It was fun. To the people in the audience, we appreciate your time. We'll send out a thank you email after this. If anybody wants to connect with me or Ganeet or Usman, feel free to just shoot me a note and I'll make sure you get connected. And, you know, we look forward to welcoming you at future webinars. Ganeet, Usman, thank you both so much. This is great. And stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great night, great morning, wherever you are, and goodbye.